Hey everyone, how's it going? Azrin here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to today's Learn Gujarati with me podcast episode, and of course, YouTube video. We're going to switch things up today. For the past couple of weeks, we've been doing a lot of listening based videos with a lot of vocabulary and stories, things like that. But today, we're going to switch things up and we're going to do a grammar deep dive. I found a document on my computer that I made like 2 years ago, something like that, and in it I do a overview of Gujarati grammar. And I thought to myself, wow, this would be great to share with others. So I'll share my screen and let's dive right in. Gujarati grammar, an overview. There are four main grammar concepts to cover in Gujarati. We have flexible word order, subject pronouns, word genders, and verb tenses. Obviously, these four categories, they don't include every grammar concept in the Gujarati language, but they do serve as a useful starting point. If you do want a very detailed look at all Gujarati grammar points, one resource you may want to look into is the Students Gujarati Grammar with exercises and vocabulary. As you can see here, the book is in the public domain since it was published in 1893. If you literally just Google that book, the Students Gujarati Grammar with exercises and vocabulary, you will find it. It's for free on the internet. There's also a paperback version available on Amazon. Knowing the Gujarati script is necessary in order to make most use of this book. If you want a free alternative, although a little bit less comprehensive, although to be honest, still very comprehensive, it's Goshik's blog. Looks like this. 108 lessons, very, very grammar focused, pretty darn comprehensive as well, and obviously it is free. So let's dive right in. So English is a language that has a relatively fixed word order. So if we take a sentence like, yesterday I went to the park with my friend to see a concert. For the most part, you can't rearrange those words. We have to keep those words in the order that they are in. If we start to move words around, it sounds a bit odd. So if I said, for example, I went yesterday to see a concert with my friend to the park, I guess it's not wrong, but it's a bit odd. I went to see a concert to the park with my friend yesterday. Again, a bit odd. With my friend, I went to the park yesterday to see a concert. It just sounds a bit strange. But Gujarati, that's not really how it works. Gujarati is a language that has a very flexible word order. So if we take the following sentence below as an example, હું કાલે મારા પપ્પા સાથે દુકાને જવાનો છું, right? This translates to tomorrow I will go to the store with my dad. The word order can be changed in many different ways, and the sentence still sounds very natural. કાલે હું મારા પપ્પા સાથે દુકાને જવાનો છું. That's fine. હું કાલે દુકાને મારા પપ્પા સાથે જવાનો છું. Fine. દુકાને હું કાલે મારા પપ્પા સાથે જવાનો છું. Also perfectly fine. Like all of those are pretty much fine. Like there's nothing wrong with them. The only convention that Gujaratis tend to follow usually is that verbs go at the end of the sentence. Aside from that, word order is pretty darn flexible. And once you have an intermediate level, you can start to play around with the word order to express like nuanced thoughts and emotions. But at the beginner level, just stick with the standard word order. And a standard word order would look something like this: time word, subject, location, object, verb. Time word examples: yesterday, today, tomorrow. Subject examples: I, you, he, she, they, we, etc. Location could be at home, at work, in the park. An object could be a dog, a shoe, a black sheep. Verbs, we all know what verbs are: do, see, watch, eat, drink, jump. Right? So as a beginner, you can kind of stick to this standard quote unquote word order, but really words can pretty much go anywhere in a sentence, and the sentence is probably still correct. Moving on to subject pronouns. So English has 7. We have I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. Gujarati has a couple more. We have hu for I. Tu is the informal word for you. We use it with friends, children, or family members around your age. Tame is the formal word for you. We use it for strangers, with family members who are much older than you, maybe aunts, uncles, grandparents, right? E is the word for he and she, same word for both. We have other variants for the word he and she as well. We could say te, we could say e in some dialects. We have some other variants there, but a is kind of like a standard quote unquote word that many people use. It, we don't have a strong Gujarati equivalent per se. Ame and apre are two words for we. Apre means I'm including you. So you and I. Ame means you didn't do it with me, but I went with someone else. So if John and I went to the park, but you didn't come with me, I would use ame park ma gaya tha. But if you, me, and John all went to the park, then apre park ma gaya tha, right? Teo is one word for they. It's used more in written language. We don't, in my classes when I teach, right? It's actually funny. I wrote this. We will not use this in class. I actually wrote this document for a specific student. Interestingly, a lot of the stuff that I have for Gujarati resources and documents like this, the things I end up writing and creating because I have Gujarati students who I'm teaching. And so I end up creating materials for them. So just a fun little side anecdote. A much more common word for they that's used in spoken language is e loco. E loco pretty much translates to like those people, something like that. So it's not exactly they, but roughly speaking, it's going to work. Functionally, it's going to translate to they in most cases in Gujarati. Now, here's where things get a bit different. Gujarati has up to 5 versions of each subject pronoun, which is not at all like English. English, we just have one version. We don't have 5 versions. So if we look at all the versions here, there's a bunch. We're not going to look at every single one, but we have a lot of them. We have like 5 different categories, and each category has a whole bunch of them. So we have tons of different versions of each of these subject pronouns. Now, how do these categories work? I've used simple language here. These are not the technical grammar terms for these categories. There are technical grammar terms, but we're just keeping it simple today. So category 1 is like the standard form of each subject pronoun. These are what we saw already up here. These are like the quote unquote standard forms, what I call the standard forms of each subject pronoun. If we scroll down here, we have category 2. Roughly speaking, we use these for most verbs in the simple past tense, which I'll explore in more depth later today. Category 3, pretty much we use it for certain sentence patterns. It's pretty much used for set phrases for the most part, and we use it for receiving actions. So if you hit me, like you hit me, I would use like mane for the word for me, right? If I hit you, like the word for you, because you received the action of hitting, I'm going to use tane or tamne, right? If I don't know, I wrote, if I wrote you a letter, like you're receiving this action of receiving a letter, right? That I'm going to use the word tamne or tane in that example. So category 3 is for receiving actions. We also have some set sentence patterns that just work with those category 3 subject pronouns. Category 4 are for the words should, must, or want. Like really easy. Should, must, or want. If you're ever saying should, must, or want, we're pretty much going to use these category 4 subject pronouns. And lastly, for category 5, these are the ones you'll use the least. In fact, if you just forgot they ever existed, it's not going to cause you a problem really in the Gujarati language. The first categories 1, 2, 3, and 4 are by far the most important. But category 5, it's pretty much used when asking for permission. Now, this is, as I said earlier, this is just a general overview. There's actually some nuances to everything that I'm sharing that we're just not covering today. We're just taking a high-level global look at what Gujarati grammar looks like as a whole. So let's move on to word gender. In Gujarati, every single noun, which is a person, place, or thing, has one of 3 genders: masculine, feminine, or neuter. Sometimes the gender is very logical and you just sort of know what it is. So chokro is boy, therefore it is masculine, duh, because it's a boy. Chokri means girl. Chokri has a feminine gender because it's a chokri, it's a girl. Ghar is neuter. You might think to yourself, oh, it's an object. Great, okay, I guess it's neuter. Like sometimes there can be a certain logic to it, but more often than not, a word's gender is wildly random. It has nothing to do with the noun itself. So for example, the word for car is gadi. Gadi has a feminine gender. I don't know why a car is feminine. It just is. Phone is phone, and it's a masculine gender. Why? I don't know. It just is. Galuriu is a puppy. Why is it neuter? I have no idea. It's a neuter gender. I don't know why. It just is. As a general rule of thumb, masculine words end in o, feminine words end in e, and neuter words end in u. So if we look at these over here, right, gadi ends in e. It's feminine. Phone doesn't quite work, unfortunately, but here, chokro ends in o, so masculine. Galuryu ends in u rather, so it's neuter. So that's a rough rule that tends to work maybe 70% of the time. But again, we have many, 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 many exceptions. Ghar doesn't end in o, u, or e. We just have to remember that it's neuter. So noun genders affect adjectives. So for example, if I want to say a black car, it's gadi, gadi. The word for black, gadi, ends in e. A black horse, garo, goro. The word for black, garo, now ends in o. A black house, garu, ghar. Now, garu ends in u, right? The word for black has changed in each of those sentences. It's changed in each circumstance because of the gender of the noun. Gadi is feminine, therefore gadi is feminine. Goro is masculine, therefore garo is masculine. Ghar is neuter, therefore garu becomes neuter. If I had two black houses, be kara ghar, right? Black ends in a because we're talking about plural, right? So when an adjective is describing a feminine object, the last letter of the adjective will change to e. When an adjective is describing a masculine object, the last letter will change generally to o. When an adjective is describing a neuter object, the last letter will generally change to u. When an adjective is describing a pluralized neuter or masculine object, the last letter will generally change to a. Right? The only real exception to this rule is if an adjective ends in a consonant, in which case the last letter will never change. So for example, the word for red is lal. Lal ends in l. It's a consonant. It's always lal. We never have lalu, lala, lali. No, just lal. Lal is lal. It never changes. Noun genders also affect verb conjugations in two tenses, but only two. So the five main tenses in Gujarati are present, simple past, imperfect past, near future, and simple future. There's also three moods. We're not going to worry too much about these at the moment, but technically speaking, it's actually funny. Even reading this, I wrote this over almost 2 years ago. It's actually funny. I actually don't even know where I got these words from, to be perfectly frank with you. I must have done like a deep dive to find the technical terminology, but there's three moods as well, apparently. Desiderative, advisory, obligatory. Don't worry too much about the technical terms. We'll make it really easy today. Noun genders have a significant impact on the simple past tense as well as the three moods. So let's dig into what that actually looks like, because I know it sounds really complicated. So in the simple past tense, the green category that indicates what a subject pronoun we're going to use. So when we are talking in the simple past tense, most of the time we're going to use these category 2 subject pronouns. When do we use the simple past? We use it for completed one-time actions in the past. If you speak Spanish, it's weirdly enough, I meet a lot of Gujarati learners who have studied some level of Spanish in their lives. Very interesting kind of coincidence. It's kind of like the pretérito in Spanish, if you've studied that. If you've studied French, it's like the passé composé. If you speak English, obviously you speak English because you're in here. It's often we have words in ed in English: jumped, washed, cleaned, things like that. So these one-time things that happen in the past. Sometimes we have specific time references in the sentence. Yesterday, last week, last year, something that tells us specifically when the action took place. Also for lists of sequential events. So if we know that action 1 happened, then action 2, then action 3, that list of events is probably going to be all in the simple past tense. The conjugation rules, again, I know we're moving relatively fast. We're just doing a kind of a big overview. We pick a verb such as vanchfu, to read. We remove the last 2 letters. The last 2 letters are always going to be vu in every single verb in Gujarati. We are left with a stem, which is vanch. And then we add one of the following endings: yo for masculine, e for feminine, u for neuter, ya for plural. So for example, if I read an article, Me lek vancho, because article is masculine. If I read a book, me chopri vanchi, because feminine, books are feminine in Gujarati. Me chapu vanchu. I read a newspaper, because newspaper is neuter. If I had a plural masculine or neuter, me chapa vanchia. We have a ya at the end because I read multiple newspaper. Plural feminine is same as singular feminine, no differences there. Right? So we notice how the last two letters of the verb change based on the gender of the nouns. The gender of the nouns, right? They change. We have one notable exception to the rule. Sometimes sentences don't have a noun. So if I said I walked, notice there's no noun in the sentence. There's no object. There's just I, and then there's walked. That's all there is. There's nothing. There's no ball. There's no nothing. It's just, that's it. In this somewhat rare circumstance, we follow all the same conjugation rules listed above, all of them, exactly the same. Nothing changes. The only thing we change is that we use these category one subject pronouns, kind of these standard subject pronouns. So for example, right, if a man said I walked, hun chalio, right? If a woman said I walked, hun chali. Why? Because it's a woman, so it's feminine. If a blob monster said I walked, hun chaliu. There's a typo here actually. This is there's a typo there, which I'll fix right now actually, because I just caught it in the Gujarati. Right, we're gonna have hun chal. Oops. Hun chaliu. Why blob monster? Because I can't think of what neuter thing would say I walk. So some blob monster, I guess, can be neuter. Why not? Right? If it's masculine or plural, masculine or neuter plural, right? Ame apne chalia, right? Three moods. We're not going to worry about these technical terms, but pretty much when we use in very simple terms, if you say want, if you say the word should, or you say the word must, right? We use these category for subject pronouns. And we're going to notice here that, well, let's keep going here. So conjugation rules, pick a verb such as vanchvu, remove the last letter. So we're left with vanchv, right? So it's not, typically we get rid of the last two letters. We get rid of vanchvu, we get rid of the vu. This time around, we're just going to get rid of the u, like we're left with vanchv, right? And then we add one of the following endings. All endings are o if the noun is masculine, e if it's feminine, u if it's neuter, a if it's masculine or neuter plural. Okay. So for example, if I said like I want to read, I want to read. Do I have examples here? I don't. No, but I can give you some. I want to read a book. Mare chopri vanchvi che. Vanchvi, because chopri is feminine. You want to read, I don't know, an article. Tare or tamare. Lek, right? Lek, vanchvo che. Yeah, I'm not going to go through this into too much depth. I actually don't care too much if you remember all the grammar rules today. But so want, that's how the wants work. The shoulds are a little different. We just add the word joye. So mare kaink vanchvu joye, tamare vanchvu joye, ene vanchvu joye, amne vanchvu joye, teone vanchvu joye, elokone vanchvu joye, right? If you need to, now we're going to have anos. So for example, Mare kaink vanchvanu che, right? Mare kaink vanchvanu che, I have to read something. Mare kaink karvanu che, I have to do something. Tamare kaink banavanu che, you have to make something. Tamare kaink lakhvanu che, you have to write something. Tamare cha pivani che, you have to drink tea, right? With these vano, vani, vanu, right? So these are kind of our wants, shoulds, and musts. Again, I know I've gone relatively fast. Relatively fast, but that's that. If you want to look at we'll take a look at two tenses where the subject pronoun's gender affects the conjugation of the verb. So we have the near future tense. We're going to use category one verbs. So when do we use this tense? Anytime we're saying going to or gonna in casual English, I'm going to go to the mall. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to whatever, right? So we pick a verb such as vanch. Again, well, we're just using vanchvu today, right? It's actually funny. I found a typo from 2 years ago when I wrote this. I had vanchvu up here and chalvu down here. But anyway, we remove the last letter. So vanchvu would become vanchv, chalvu becomes chalv, right? And then we add one of the endings. So if a man said, I'm going to walk, hu chalvano, I've actually missed hu chalvano, chu. We have to add chu at the end. I wonder if I added it later on. Yes, I did. Great. So we're going to have vano for masculine, ani for feminine, anu for neuter, which won't happen very often. And plural, all genders is ana. So for example, we have huchalvano, huchalvani for feminine, huchalvanu for neuter, huchalvana for like a group of people, for example. And then we're gonna add one of these following words based on who is the one, based on the subject pronoun, who is the one doing the action. So if I'm the one doing it, we're gonna add chu. Uchalvano chu for male, for masculine, uchalvani chu for feminine, so on and so forth, right? You're gonna walk, tu blah 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 che, tu chalvano che, tu chalvani che, right? Tame chalvana cho, e chalvano che, e chalvani che, e chalvana che, right? Ame apre, again, chalvana chie, we're gonna add chie at the end, and e loco, we just have che. Okay, we have an imperfect past tense as well. We're going to use these category 1 subject pronouns. When do we use it? We use it for habitual repeated actions in the past. If in English, we frequently use the word used to. I used to do this, but I don't anymore. I used to blah, 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 blah. Ongoing actions in the past, usually it's a was plus verb ing. I was walking, I was eating, I was swimming, I was cooking, etc. And then background information or descriptions of the past. It was a bright sunny day. The clouds there's not a single cloud in the sky. The man was wearing the man had a blue hat and green pants, right? These are all background informations and descriptions all in the past. So we pick our verb again. I see I've got a typo here as well. We pick a verb such as chalvu, right? We get rid of the last 2 letters. We're left with chal, and we add one of the following endings. So hu chal to hato for masculine, huchal ti hati for feminine, huchal tu hatu for neuter. It doesn't happen very often, but it could happen, I suppose. Right? And then for neuter and plural neuter and masculine, it's tal ta hatta. I can already see here I had a typo when I made this a couple years ago. So we're missing we need ta and hatta, when you kind of need both, right? Chalta hatta. Here we have chaltu hattu. Here we're gonna have chalti hatti. Chalto hatto we already have, so that's already done. It's not really an exception to the rule, but it's worth noting that the words hato, hati, hatu, and hatta, they're often shortened to to, ti, tu, ta. So for example, we look here, huchalto hato might sound like huchal toto. Huchalti hati might sound like huchalti ti. A blob monster walking, huchaltu hatu might sound like huchaltu tu. Right? Ame chalta hatta might sound like ame chaltata. We kind of drop that ha, which is very common in the Gujarati language. We do drop the letter ha very frequently in the Gujarati language. It's very, 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 very frequent. The final tenses we'll look at are the simple present and the simple future. They both use category 1 subject pronouns. Simple present, we use it for general truths and facts, things that are happening right now, like I'm reading right now. And then habitual action, something you do like every day or every week, every month, right? For conjugation rules, we pick a verb such as vanchvu. We get rid of the last 2 letters, and then we add the following based on the table below. So I read or I am reading, hu vanch u chu, hu van chu chu. If it's tu vanch e che, tame vanch o cho, e vanch e che, ame apre vanch ye chie, e loco vanch e che. Like those green highlighted ones, those are the possible endings. For the simple future, we use it for events that take place in the future. The key word is will. It will happen, right? We take a verb like vanch, right? Like your vanchfu again, we drop the last two letters. We're left with vanch as a stem. So for example, I will read, hu vanch ish, tu vanch ish again, tame vanch sho, e vanch she, ame apne vanch shu. For ame apne, we could also have, I didn't actually write it here, but there is an option for vanch I shu. Vanchi shu is also correct. Kind of depends on the person. It is worth noting that for all of these here, for these future tense ones, all of these SHs, vanchish, vanchish, vansho, all of those SHs could be pronounced as an S. Uvanchis, tuvanchis, tamevancho, evanche, etc., etc. They can absolutely be pronounced as S's because remember how I told you earlier, H's are dropped in Gujarati very frequently. So if we drop the H, we're left with an S. So that's very, very, very common in the Gujarati language. So quick little summary. I am doing something in the present tense. The gender does not matter. Masculine, feminine, we don't care. Right? Simple past endings matter. The ending is based on the noun gender in general. Noun gender doesn't matter what your gender are. You're a man, woman. It doesn't matter generally. Right? It generally doesn't matter what you are. It matters. The noun is what matters. Right? If there is no noun, if there's no noun in the sentence, then it matters if you're a man or a woman or whatever. Then your gender matters. But if not, we don't care. It's based on the noun. Okay. Imperfect past tense, endings based on the subject, pronoun, noun, gender. Near future tense, endings are based on the subject, pronoun, noun, gender. This is like that gonna tense. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Simple future tense, will, the gender does not matter whatsoever. And lastly, when we use the words want, should, or must, those three words, the ending's based on the noun gender. Doesn't matter what you are, it matters the gender of the noun you're talking about. Last but not least, we'll look at when do we use these category 3 and category 5 subject pronouns. We've looked at a bunch of examples quickly, albeit I realize that. I perfectly acknowledge we've moved very, very, very fast. But we haven't looked at all at these category 3 and category 5 subject pronouns. So let's look at those. Category 3 subject pronouns, we use them pretty much in any tense to express specific verbs, right? So like, not even verbs, it's more like phrases, honestly. When I look at this now, 2 years later after making this document, it's almost like phrases. So to be hungry, right? It's like mane, we don't say hu, we say mane. Mane bhuk lagi che. Mane taras lagi che, right? Mane thak, like we have mane. We use like mane, tane, tamne, ene, amne, like we use these. We never say hu or tu or tame. We don't say mete. We don't say those ones, right? So these are some very common examples. To be hungry, thirsty, tired, hot, cold, remembering something, to like something, to want something, right? They're also used to express the following words. Like, we're not going to worry too much about this. Actually, we're going to skip this. Actually, don't worry about that. And lastly, these category 5 subject pronouns, I've left them for last because they're not really used all that often. There's a couple of limited use cases, but the one that's used somewhat frequently, I guess, is if you're asking if something can be done specifically by you, right? It's like Marathi khavai? Can this be eaten by me? Like, am I able to eat this? Like, maybe I'm allergic to milk and this has milk in it, or I don't know, maybe like I don't eat meat and I'm wondering, does this have meat? Like Marathi khavai, right? Can this be eaten by me? Very, very limited use, as you can see, right? In such a sentence, using Marathi makes it clear that although you are physically able to eat it, like obviously I could eat this, you have doubts about if you specifically should be eating it. Maybe it is milk and you're lactose intolerant. Maybe it is sugar, you're diabetic. Like maybe it wasn't cooked for you, it's for guests. We don't know, right? So the conjugation rule, we use our subject pronoun from this table up here. So one of these category 5 subject pronouns, one of those. we have our verb ending in I, right? So like Marathia karai, Marathia lakhai, Marathia bolai, right? These are kind of how they end at the end. And yeah, I mean, over time, it'll be a lot easier to use all these grammar points and many others. This is not everything when you're speaking. Like lots of listening and speaking is really the key. Reading is also very useful should you decide to learn how to read. There obviously are other grammar points in Gujarati aside from these, but these are the main ones, and it's way more than enough for the time being. So if obviously to really master these, lots of listening, lots of speaking, lots of practice, like obviously it's going to be really, really important. If you do want to work with me on a private basis, like one-on-one, you want me to help you practice, just visit my website. Looks like this. I'll show you. This is not it. I'll just go to it now. Yeah, just go to my website and looks like this. You can watch the video to learn more about my program. There's also a transcript down here in case you prefer to read. Fill out the Google form, and then I'll obviously be in touch. AzrinTheLanguageNerd.com. Okay, cool. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. See you later. Bye bye.